There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
So this is what I'm looking at as I film this tag video. Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am outside. I'm so high-tech now because I bought a new iPad which I'm using to film this, and all my microphones, including my portable lapel mic, work with it. And my old iPad I can use instead of printing out a bunch of notes. So here I am sitting across from a shrine, and I'm just going to pause because somebody is praying. I'm not filming it, but I don't want to be talking loudly. I've got a bottle of hot coffee from the convenience store. The hot coffee cans have not yet made their way into the vending machines. It's a sunny morning, around 7:30 in the morning. I'm feeling completely healthy today, and I thought it's time to do a tag video. I think I'm going to make a bunch of videos today because I feel so good. So this is my old neglected BookTube Parasite tag, which I created several months ago, and it never really took off. Although Michael from MCS Books did a great version of this tag. Steve Donahue's done it a couple times, including the one that I'm going to be sponging off of today. And the basic concept, which I over-explained in my original tag, but can be summed up very simply: find some booktuber's video where they're talking about a bunch of books, make your own video mooching off that other booktuber's video talking about the books they talk about. And one thing that I did specify in my original tag, which was it doesn't really make sense to do somebody else's tag video and just talk about the books they talk about in their tag video. Just do the tag, right? But I'm going to break that rule today, as Steve Donahue did, because he was challenged. I actually can't remember if I was challenged to do this particular video, but let's get to the point. Curtis of Curtis Books and Books and his friend Conor did the intimidating TBR tag. I've already done the intimidating TBR tag, so now I'm going to ignore that tag, and I'm just going to talk about the books that those guys talked about in their version of the tag. So this is the Book Parasite tag. You won't hear me refer to any of the prompts of the intimidating TBR tag. It's a great tag. I've done it. You should do it. But I'm just going to talk about the books they talked about. Okay? And here goes nothing. I actually have more to say about the books Conor talked about because I wasn't as familiar with them, but I'm going to go down the list here. The first one that Curtis talked about was Wolf Hall, which he couldn't finish, and it's one of the best British novels in the 20th century, I think, and well deserved of all the accolades, but it's not for everybody, and it's, when the time is right. I devoured it, as I did the sequel. I hope the third one will come out someday, but it's a masterful novel. I know other readers that I've talked to about it struggled with the politics and the history of it, which I loved, but that's not for everybody. So it's a book that's not for everybody, but Curtis, give it another try when you get old or older. I have no idea whether I would have been into it when I was 16 or however old Curtis is now. Matthias Enard, Zone. I don't know anything about Zone, but the other one, what was the other one he wrote? I think I ended up buying it because of not thinking things through before I followed one of my beloved booktuber friends' recommendations. And then I flipped through it, did the page 112, and just read a couple reviews. No, this is not even fiction. It's just philosophy or something like that. It has nothing to do with the kind of fictional discourse that gets me excited. So anything from that press, I wouldn't read anything from that press. They publish intellectual European fiction that's not really fiction, it's just philosophy, which is my problem with most European fiction except German and maybe a couple other exceptions. So there's that. Curtis talked about a mammoth biography of Jane Austen by David Noakes. I have very little interest in Jane Austen's life. I don't think there is much, so I don't know, can't imagine how you'd make a 600-page or however many page biography it is of Jane Austen. Nobody knows very much. I'm not interested. So what I have learned in the last year or two is, if I'm deeply, deeply interested in the person, I enjoy reading their biography. So this year I totally geeked out over a Barbara Pym biography, and I'm currently finishing up a biography of E.F. Benson, and I'm really enjoying it. I've really enjoyed both of those because I'm really interested in the writers. But Jane Austen, not so much. I'd like to reread her novels, but a biography, no. So with most nonfiction, and I'm going to say this again, I'll say it once and then I don't have to say it again in the same video, but most nonfiction is so boring because I'm not really interested in things happening in the real world. And so I'd rather read a Steve Donahue book review and I'm good. I don't want all the details. The sequel that Curtis talked about was Kudos by Rachel Cusk, and he loved, see this, Outline by Rachel Cusk. This is the first in, is it a trilogy or something? And this is one of those books that I'm either going to love or hate. I keep hearing so much about it that I keep putting off starting it. I don't think I'm even going to crack this for 5 years. I have to completely forget everything I've heard. That's my new thing about popular books. If I've heard too much, they get pushed back. That's going to come up later in this video. The Long Take by Robin Robertson. It's on some book prize or other. And it sounds really interesting, except I don't want poetry in my fiction. So, Britta, I know you loved it. Anybody who's read it, if I can skip all the poetry and still have a satisfying reading experience, tell me in the comments below and I'll try it. But no poetry in my fiction. Cormac McCarthy, I think I'm pretty much deeply uninterested in him, but I will try him someday. But maybe in 10 or 20 years after he's dead. Yeah, but not very interested. Anita Bruckner, I think I'm going to hate her. I've never tried her. I finally tracked down a copy of Hotel du Lac. I think I'm going to hate it. But it might be a fun hate read. It's very short. So, yeah, I don't think she's going to be for me. She's a little bit too quaint. And I don't think I'm going to like her writing very much. Middlemarch, I liked it. I loved the epigraphs at the beginning of each chapter. There were parts of it that I thought were really, really good, but I wasn't as wowed by it as Virginia Woolf was, or lots of other great readers. I should reread it, but didn't quite get what all the fuss was about, and I have to admit the same thing happened with Jane Eyre, which I read a couple of years ago. It's like, the only person I really liked was Rochester. He talked about History of World War I by David Stevenson again. Give me a 1,000-word, 5,000-word book review article in the New Yorker. I'll read that. I'm good. I have no desire to read a humongous tome about World War I. No, thank you. And Paradise Lost, I don't like reading poetry, particularly, especially antiquated poetry. I think I read the whole thing as an undergrad at the University of Saskatchewan. One of the professors staged every year, whatever the weekend was, a public reading of the entire poem of Paradise Lost, and invited students and professors, and it was a 12-hour or 20-hour thing, public reading. I participated in that. So I know I read a section because I had to read it publicly. But no, I'm not interested in anything pre-19th century. For enjoyment, I enjoyed studying it, but reading for enjoyment, a cutoff for me is the turn of the 19th century. Now, for some novels, perhaps 50 years before that. I don't know. I haven't tested it, but yeah, no. So I think those were the books Curtis talked about. So let's move on to what Conor talked about. He talked about Infinite Jest, and I agree with him. I think I read a few more pages than he did, and it's just garbage. It read like text that had been Google translated from English to Russian to Cree to German to Swahili and then back into English. I was kind of interested in David Foster Wallace. Before that, I quite liked The Broom of the System, which was, I believe, was his debut novel. When I read it 15 years ago, who knows how I'd feel about it now. But the more I hear about him personally now, I'm kind of turned off, so I don't think I'll ever read any more by him. That's the way I roll. If I don't like the author, I don't want to read the books. It's kind of a Bill Cosby thing. Donna Tartt, Conor talked about The Secret History. I'm just inundated with stuff that I've heard, and subscribers here and bookish people everywhere. 50% of them say, "Oh, Sean, you're going to love it," and the other 50%, "Sean, it's not going to be a book for you." And the more I hear about it, the more I don't want to read it, because I keep hearing about it. So will I ever forget what I've heard? Maybe not, in which case I will never read any Donna Tartt. But if I ever, I'm on a deserted island with a copy of The Secret History, well, maybe, after enough years have passed. This was interesting. Mervyn Peake, the Gormenghast trilogy. I was familiar with the title. That's all. The title and the author. So I've done a little bit of, Googling and whatnot, and it's fantasy. Published starting in the 1940s, I believe, and unfinished at the time of his death. But apparently the first book wasn't considered fantasy. I don't even know if fantasy as a genre really existed in the 1940s. But as the series developed, it became more fantastical. I hate fantasy, so I think. I can't remember the last time I tried to read a fantasy. Probably not since I was about 12, but, I'm a snob. But I must say that I read the opening paragraphs. I'm not entirely sure if this is from the first one, but here are the opening 3 short paragraphs of whichever book I stumbled upon. I think it was the first one. Titus is 7. His confines Gormenghast, suckled on shadows, weaned, as it were, on webs of ritual. For his ears, echoes. For his eyes, a labyrinth of stone. And yet within his body, something other than this umbrageous legacy. For first and ever foremost, he is child. A ritual more compelling than ever man devised is fighting anchored darkness. A ritual of the blood, of the jumping blood. These quicks of sentience owe nothing to his forebears, but to those feckless hosts 1,000,000,000,000 deep of the globe's childhood. The gift of the bright blood, of blood that laughs when the tenants mutter, "Weep," of blood that mourns when the sere laws croak, "Rejoice." O little revolution in great shades. Now I must say, I quite like that writing, and that really drew me in. So, what the hell? Maybe I'll try it. Why not? Be good for me. Maybe I'll end up hating it. I don't think I'm a fantasy reader, but have I ever tried one in my adult life? I don't think so. So that was interesting. And that's why I love this tag, because one of the things that I do with the BookTube Parasite tag is that I do kind of a deep dive and look up free excerpts and whatnot. Conor talked about a new novel, I think 2018 novel, A Weekend in New York by Benjamin Markovits. I'd never heard of this author, and so I've done quite a bit of Googling, and he is an American author in the UK, quite young. He abandoned his unpromising career as a basketball player and went to Oxford to study the romantic poets or the romantic writers, and now he's a novelist. The book A Weekend in New York definitely isn't for me. It's about some professional tennis player, so no. But on Scribd, there's a couple others, and one that I think was 2015 or something, which is called, it's got a really geeky title, You Don't Have to Live Like This. It's got an incredibly low rating on Goodreads, like 2.5 or something. And I liked the opening few paragraphs, but as per the page 112 approach to sampling a book, that doesn't say very much, but it was quite engaging. It sounds like he's quite a cerebral writer, and a lot of the complaints about this book, which ends up being some kind of a social novel about real estate and race in Detroit, from the perspective of a white real estate agent. A lot of the complaints in Goodreads were that people read a third or a half of the book and there was still nothing about the social, racial issues, like nothing was really happening, and that kind of drives me crazy. So even though I may try it because it's available to me on Scribd, or I may read a few more pages further in, but maybe he's not going to be a writer for me, but I was certainly interested to find out more about him. I was more interested in the Norwegian writer translated into English, Roy Jacobsen, The Burnt Out Town of Miracles. So this is a story set in Finland as the Russians are about to invade the country. One man in the town stays because he doesn't want to leave his hometown and he thinks the Russians aren't going to be too much trouble. And it's about what happens to him. I read the opening paragraphs. Pretty good. Conor said it was really sparse prose and really emotionless. It's really cheap on Kindle, like 500 yen, like $5 or something. So I might try it, but the story sounds interesting. As long as when he stays in the town, he's not there alone, because I don't do well with Robinson Crusoe type stories where it's one man alone. No, 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 no. But if the Russians come and there's some social interaction, it could be a Sean book. So I'm going to try it. 120 Days of Sodom by Marquis de Sade. How about 52 Years of Sodom? I have no interest in that book. Not at all. Because I'm just living my best sodomite life. Much more interesting to me is the Mikhail Sholokhov and Quiet Flows the Dawn. I didn't read it as an undergrad, even though I read quite a bit of Russian literature, but it was probably too much of a tome to be included on any of the syllabi that I studied, but I previewed it on Scribd, and even though it seemed like a bit of a stilted translation, there must be much better, more modern translations, but even though it was, I was really drawn in for the opening pages. Apparently there's some controversy about whether he was the writer. It was published from the mid-1920s up to about 1940, so during like Stalinist Russia. So I am interested in reading it, especially if I can find a more modern translation. So I now challenge Curtis and Conor to a three-way buddy read on Voxer, maybe in the latter half of 2019. It's a tome, but I would like to read it next year after that, sometime before I die. But how about a buddy read? Ottessa Moshfegh. Again, I've heard too much about her. I think I'm going to love her or hate her. I won't be in the middle. I've heard her interviewed. She's really weird. Sometimes that works for me, sometimes not. I heard Michael Silverblatt interview her. I think it was a 2-part interview on his KCRW book radio show, Bookworm. And it made me interested to start with her debut, Mick Glue, which I have not yet done. So sometime, but again, I keep hearing too much about her. But Mick Glue I haven't heard much about except on that interview. I'll put a link to that podcast, and you can have a listen. But yeah, I'll try Mick Glue and take it from there. But I have a feeling I'm really not sure whether she's going to be for me. Star Wars: A New Hope by George Lucas. Yeah, that TV show with, what's the Canadian guy, and Dr. Spock and stuff. I watched it as a kid, but no interest in sci-fi or TV tie-in novels at all. Oh, I guess it was written by the TV show creator, George Lucas, so maybe it's more legit. But no, thank you, sci-fi. Bleh. To boldly go where no man has gone before. Well, I don't want to go there. All right. John Updike, very little interest in him, although I did read one of his short stories a few years ago that I really liked. It was a little bit overdone, but it was about a husband and wife in the middle of winter, and they were having problems in their marriage, and the car was stuck in the driveway, and together they pushed it through, and it was a little bit heavy-handed, but it kind of resonated with me. But I think I could probably go have a really rich, fulfilling reading life without ever reading very much more John Updike. Now, Willa Cather, I have psychological trauma around Willa Cather, and I don't think I'm ever going to be able to enjoy her. This is about being a grad student, my master's program at York University in Toronto. It was Henry James, Edith Wharton, and Willa Cather. I hated Henry James, except for The Bostonians, which was the one novel that he didn't edit the shit out of until he died. Edith Wharton, pretty good. Didn't really connect with Willa Cather, but by the time we got that late in the course, I was hating grad school so much. I was depressed, and it affected everything. And I tried to read a Willa Cather novel because so many people who love the same kind of books as I do love Willa Cather. And so I picked one up. It was the one set in Quebec, so maybe it wasn't one of her best books. Just last year, I think. And it just brought back all those memories of grad school, and I got depressed again, and I couldn't get into it. So I think Willa Cather is skunked for Sean the Book Maniac, but maybe I'll try again in 10 or 15 years. All right, well, this was fun. So again, why don't you try the BookTube Parasite tag? I'm going to tag a few people. So again, just pick any booktuber's video. It doesn't have to be the one that I just mooched off of, the one that Curtis and Conor did, although it could be. It could be one of my videos, but it doesn't have to be. Choose any booktuber's video where they talk about a lot of books and just talk about those books. That's all there is to it. It usually doesn't make sense to mooch off a tag video, just do the tag. But in this case, I've done the intimidating TBR tag, so it was really fun to just talk about the books those guys talked about in their version of the tag. So do with this tag what you will, and let's see. Charlotte of Tired Mama Tries to Read. Charlie Brook. Marie of MH Books. Heidi of My Reading Life. All right, have fun with it. I sure did. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.